Hey kids, this is Princess Readalong from Kids Reading Corner 207, and today we're going to read Miss Nelson is Back by James Marshall. Words by Harry Allard, pictures by James Marshall. Miss Nelson is back. One Friday, Miss Nelson told her class that she was going to have her tonsils out. "I'll be away next week," she said, "and I expect you to behave." "Yes, Miss Nelson," said the kids in class 207. At recess, it was another story. "Wow," said the kids. "While Miss Nelson's away, we can really act up." "Not so fast," said a big kid from room 309. "Haven't you ever heard of U.S.A swamp?" "Who?" said Miss Nelson's kids. "Miss Swamp is the meanest substitute in the whole world," said the big kid. "Nobody acts up when she's around." "Ooh," said Miss Nelson's kids. "She's a real witch," said the big kid. "Ooh," said Miss Nelson's kids. "I just bet you'll get the swamp," said the big kid. One Monday morning, Miss Nelson's kids were all in their seats. They were very nervous. Some of them have not slept well all weekend. "If we get the swamp, I'll just die," said one kid. They heard footsteps in the hall. Slowly the knob turned and the door opened. It was Mr. Blansworth, the principal. "I shall personally take over the class," he said. Miss Nelson's kids were so relieved, but soon they learned Mr. Blansworth was not a lot of fun. All morning, Mr. Blansworth tried to amuse the kids with his corny card tricks. "Oh, brothers," said the class. That afternoon, Mr. Blansworth showed the class his favorite shadow puppets. "This is kid stuff," said the class. The next day, Mr. Blansworth demonstrated his favorite bird calls. They were not a success. And for 2 days, Mr. Blansworth showed slides of his goldfish Lucy. Miss Nelson's kids had never been so bored. While dusting their racers in the schoolyard, 3 of the ringleaders of 207 discussed the situation. "Something will have to be done," they said. "We must get rid of Blansworth." And they hatched a plan. After school, they painted and sewed and borrowed some old clothes. And they practiced some very difficult stunt work in the backyard. The next day, they weren't in class. "That's too bad," said Mr. Blansworth. "They'll miss all the excitement." Mr. Blansworth was about to show the class his collection of ballpoint pens from all over the world when someone came to the door. Slowly the knob turned and the door opened. "Oh, look," said the class. "Miss Nelson's back." A tall and lumpy Miss Nelson tottered into the room. Mr. Blansworth was surprised. "You're back sooner than we expected," he said. The tall and lumpy Miss Nelson didn't speak. Said the kids. "Her throat must still be sore." "Are you sure you're well enough?" said Miss Blansworth. "She's sure," said the kids. "Well, in that case," said the principal, "I'll be getting back to the office. Nice to have you back, Miss Nelson." And he left the room. "Hot dog," cried the class. "We got rid of Blandsworth. Now we can do just as we please." Just at the stroke of 10, the kids from 207 left the building. No one stopped them. They went straight to the movies, where they saw The Monster That Ate Chicago twice. "This really is living," they said. Afterward, they went to Lulu's, where they stuffed themselves silly, but soon they made a serious mistake. Heading back to school, they passed Miss Nelson's house. Miss Nelson couldn't believe her eyes. "Those are my kids," she said in a scratchy voice. "What are they doing out of school? Who is that with them?" Miss Nelson telephoned to Mr. Blandsworth to see what's going on. "You're not Miss Nelson," said Blandsworth. "Miss Nelson is back." And he hung up. "Can't fool me," he said. Said Miss Nelson. "Something will have to be done." And she went to her closet. Back in room 207, Miss Nelson's kids were spending an agreeable afternoon. They were very pleased with themselves. "We should do this more often," they said. They did not notice the figure out in the hall. And slowly the knob turned, and the door opened. My name is Rula Swamp," said the lady in a scratchy voice. "Yipes!" cried the kids. "The swamp!" "That's right," said Miss Swamp, "and I'm here to whip this class into shape. Get back to those desks on the double." The class did as it was told. The big kid from 309 was certainly right. Miss Swamp was a real witch. She knew how to get the results. The class did a whole week of work in no time. "We shouldn't have gotten rid of Blandsworth," they said. Pipe down," said the Swamp. Or just then something under a desk attracted her attention. It was a mask. "Aha," said Miss Swamp. "So that's your little game." And she tried on the mask, just as Mr. Blandsworth stepped into the room. No one. "I'm Miss Nelson," said Blandsworth. "I am of the opinion that someone has been impersonating you." "Uh-oh," whispered the kids. "You don't say," said Miss Swamp. "Probably just some kids acting up. I'm sure it won't happen again." Then Mr. Blandsworth left. "And it won't, will it?" said Miss Swamp to the class. "'Cause the swamp will be watching." A minute later, Miss Nelson appeared. "I'm back," she said. "Hot dog," cried the kids. "Are we glad to see you? Didn't you have fun with Mr. Blandsworth?" said Miss Nelson. Said the kids. They decided not to mention Miss Rula Swamp, but they wondered why Miss Nelson hadn't seen her in the hall. The end. Thanks for listening. Read lots.